Let us gather in the world that lives between the lines.
If speaking is belonging, is a truth I know to heart, if speaking means you have to listen,
Let us come together in the dream that dawns beneath the text.
if you have to hear me when you read me, because my rage is in these words, and so is my calm, and so is the voices I listen to.
Let us lean in to hear the song that sings around the edges.
If listening means I exist, if existing is breath othered in story, what of my speaking is not sacred?
Let us practice the new day that draws us from beyond the words.
These words are something other than you reading them. I speak like I got a right to say something, like my life depends on it.
Listen to the song of the wind. Listen to the song of the wind. Listen to the song of the wind. Listen, God is singing. God is singing. Listen to the dreams in the night. Listen to the dreams in the night. Listen to the dreams in the night. Listen, God is singing. God is singing. Listen to the sigh of the soul. Listen to the sigh of the soul. Listen to the sigh of the soul. Listen, God is singing. God is singing.
We are blessed today to hear the work and to share in bearing witness to the work of Dr. Sharon Jacob's class, More Than Words. And so I wanted to just invite Dr. Jacob to offer us a few words of framing for what we are experiencing today.
Thank you, Dr. Fenema, and good morning, everyone. And I am so happy to bring the work of, unfortunately, just a few of my students, because the work and the hard work that my students did was just amazing. And to bring that to you this morning and to share their work is honestly my honor and my privilege. And I wish we could have had 3 hours of this worship so we could have heard every single one of them. This class that I taught was a 7-week class. It was called More Than Words, Preaching Through Art. And in this, one of the things we explored together was how to read the words beyond the word, how to read the text beyond the words of the pages, learning how to give voices to those voices who have historically remained silent, or those voices who have spoken, but we have chosen not to listen to. We also learned in our practices, in terms of creating our work and in our meditation practice, to read against the grain of the text, to resist the temptation to locate the voice of the divine where the narrator or the author tells us where the divine is, but instead we took a choice to locate the divine elsewhere in the text, sometimes elsewhere in the text, sometimes elsewhere in us beyond the text. And so this morning we share a couple of the work that the students have done, and they have done it so beautifully with so much hard work, and they have truly elevated the text, liberated it, and are giving us some creative interpretations, which I think bring truth to the way in which the biblical text needs to be read and feel liberated and empowering to all readers. So I'm very excited, and I hope you all take some inspiration with the service today.
Good morning, everyone. The reading right now is from Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 10. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Agar, the Egyptian slave girl, and gave her to the husband Abram as wife. He went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. Power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave girl of..." She said, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude."
I See God, a spoken word poem on Hagar's response to the Lord's messenger. Apparently, in these days, one's identity does not begin in their mother's womb. Instead, identity, in the sense where you see me as beautifully and wonderfully made, only begins when I, Hagar, become a mother. You are certainly Elroy, the God who sees me now. But did you see me when I was in bondage? Did you see me when I was, open quote, given, close quote, to my oppressor? Did you see me when my oppressor's mistress, to put it lightly, dealt harshly with me? Are you a sadist? Standing in the wilderness, I stare at the image in the spring of water, looking not at you, but your messenger. I not only name you, but I curse you, you coward. Messenger of Elroy, tell your God this: I, Hagar, will bear a child. I will call them Ishmael, for I have recognized my affliction. This child will be free. They shall be the catalyst for a great nation. I, Hagar, will return to my oppressors not because of weakness nor submission, but to be a reminder to the oppressor that I am the author of my life, keeper of my identities. I take my hand and splash it against the waters. The messenger disappears. I see a face. Elroy? No. Another god? No. Hagar. I see Hagar.
I invite you to join me in singing this song of response. I'll sing it through once and then invite you to join me on the second time through. You can't kill the spirit. She is like the ocean, wide and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can't kill the spirit. She is like the ocean, wide and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can kill the spirit. She is like the ocean, wide and strong. She goes on and on and on.
The reading is from Revelation chapter 19, verses 11 through 21. Then I saw heaven opened, and there was a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. And he has a name inscribed that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. The armies of heaven, wearing fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name inscribed, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, "Come, gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of the mighty, the flesh of horses and their riders, flesh of all, both free and slave, both small and great." Then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against the rider on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed in its presence the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, and the rest were killed by the sword of the rider on the horse, the sword that came from his mouth, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh.
Good morning, everyone. I had a short, crazy text, and I just want to start out with a question, which is, do I have any cat lovers in the house? Jess is here. I know there's at least one. What color is your cat, for those of you who have one? The reason that I ask this is because whether you have a orange cat, black cat, gray cat, it's actually statistically true that black cats are less likely to be adopted than other types of cats. There's research on this, that black cats are not really preferred by cat owners, and they're also more likely to be euthanized. We have a color problem in this country, because in this country, we hate the color black. I've been reading the book, My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, about racialized trauma in the US. And this book tells us that police brutality, which is a huge epidemic today, yes, is a product of racism, but it's also a response of the reptilian brain. Police officers are affected by centuries of trauma, which trains their brains to go into a fight or flight response when they come before a black body. We have internalized this false message that black is dangerous. And in the same way we hate the color black, we are obsessed with the color white. About 2 months ago, I got married in a white dress. And as much as I consider myself a non-traditional person, and I resist against the purity culture that the white dress came from, I still really wanted the white dress. Even if it doesn't represent purity to me, it still represented goodness, newness, and hope. It was the same for John of Patmos, who wrote the book of Revelation. In chapter 19, the text we just read is a war scene. So we have the rider on the white horse leading the armies of heaven versus the beast leading the kings of the earth. And in verse 11, it says, this rider is riding on the white horse. He is called faithful and true, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. So this rider, which represents the armies of heaven, the text says is wearing fine linen, white and pure, and following him are soldiers on white horses. So here again, we have this association with white being attached to goodness, pureness, and the right side. Now, of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with the colors black and white. But in America, we have a long history of equating whiteness with the winners and blackness with the losers. Not just in theory, but in practice. We have used violence against black and brown bodies to make sure whiteness remains at the top of the food chain. I see this in this text. John of Patmos's white horse and rider, who are supposed to represent the army of God, also use violence to get their way. In verses 20 and 21, we read that they throw people into a lake of fire. They use their sword to murder the opposing army. They feed their victims to the birds. If this is what whiteness is, then I don't want it. Now, I feel for John of Patmos. The vision laid out in the book of Revelation is a noble attempt to invite people into a new reality, where empire is defeated and all who suffer under its rule can get vengeance. John of Patmos was right to create a vision, but his vision fell short because it's a violent vision, and it's not the vision of Jesus. Jesus's response to empire was not war. It was not to create a dichotomy between lightness and darkness. Actually, Jesus's ministry wasn't anything like this vision John of Patmos has in Revelation. So I want to end by asking us to look inside ourselves and make sure that our preference for whiteness does not get in the way of the arrival of the kingdom of heaven. It's too easy to believe the lie that Jesus cared about being victorious. It's too easy to believe the lie that Jesus was like a soldier. Let us not let this misconception bleed into our visions of the future like John of Patmos did. Let's remember that Jesus exercised love, resistance, not to replace the empire, but to expose you that equate whiteness with being today. Amen.
You can kill the spirit. She is like this breathing, broad and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can kill the spirit. She is like this breathing, broad and strong. She goes on and on and on.
A reading from the book of Esther. Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what was happening and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him and entreat him for her people. Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person
While we wait to see if Dr. Schlager will unfreeze. Perhaps I will continue reading. Can folks hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Great. Are you there, Bernie?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, this is what Esther was saying in reply to Mordecai. Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Here ends the reading.
Book of Esther Revisited. Part 1. Ancestor. Here are the ways this could end. Badly. My wrists and ankles in chains, or my neck wrapped in thick rope, or my body disappeared, said to be banished like Queen Vashti. I'm so sorry, I'm echoing in someone's. There we go. Said to be banished like Queen Vashti, but we all know what banished really means. We all know what courage costs in this house. Here are the places I could be instead. My room, wrapped in blankets and sipping tea, beside another woman, lamenting all that our beloved fathers have done to us. In bed with the king, even, though he has not called me for days. I could be anywhere but this door. Vines grow thick in my chest, binding me to this promise I never made, not me. Born Jewish, born a woman, made an orphan, chosen by a king, and for what? For this? For such a time as this, my uncle says, as though it's some great honor to put my life at stake. As though the opportunity to die is a gift from God. Well, I say it is no gift. If God would grant me freedom, that would be a gift indeed. 10 minutes to pack my things, 10 to say farewell to the women I have lived with, the women I have loved, gone before a man could catch his breath and leagues away before his first step to follow. All I ever wanted was my life, you know? Just this, the breath in my chest and the drumbeat of my heart on every patch of tender skin my fingers touch. I feel it thrumming frantically now, running, begging me not to go, not to open this door, not to face the king who knows nothing of the heart but desire and wrath. Oh, my people, you deserve better than this. Someone more than me to save you. Some deliverer with a heart of iron and hands of stone, not this soft and fleshy body I am too afraid to lose. If there were someone better, I would send her ahead of me. But I am all there is. I am all there is for you, my people. And if I must perish, well, then I shall perish. So it goes. So I go. Part 2. Descendant. Pockets full of old receipts and inkless pens, I am no more prepared than you were with your necklace and your terrified heart. I have no king's ear to bend, no golden scepter to hang my hope on, no scheduled date for all of my beloved people to die. No courage either. Stay afraid, St. Carrie said, but do it anyway. I've got half of that down. What does my heart know but fear? Nightmare images cascade across my vision, all the ways we're dying even now, all the bodies pierced and torn and broken, starved and bound and silenced. Stay afraid is no great trouble for me. I can hardly think how you did it, how you pushed the door open and walked in, unsanctioned, unauthorized, undeterred by the nightmare I know you could see. I suppose there was death on both sides of the door. Of your body, if you entered. Of your spirit, if you stayed. I feel the slow and agonizing death of my soul, too. Every body that falls takes a sliver of me. Every falling body I cannot catch takes my breath away. Surely I have power somewhere. Surely I can follow you with scared and steady feet, but where? I have no king's ear, no throne room to enter unbidden. I have truth to speak aplenty, but none to listen. Where is the king for me, Esther? I beg of you, show me the throne room. Where is the king?
You can kill the spirit. She is like a mountain, old and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can kill the spirit. She is like a mountain, old and strong. She goes on and on and on. A reading from Revelation. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her, the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are the peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and will burn her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand her over to the beast, their royal authority, until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth."
Lately, I have heard many people compare the events of 2020 to the books of Exodus or Revelation. Corrupt government officials, plague, fires, floods, and more. I have to admit, I too have found myself wondering, is this the end times? I do believe we are undergoing our own revelation of sorts. However, perhaps not how QAnon would like us to believe. In Revelation chapter 17, we hear one of John's visions, which alludes to the evil of the Roman Empire. There is serious violence implicated in Revelation 17 that we simply cannot ignore. Far too often, we become desensitized to the violence in our biblical text. We respond to a Sunday church reading detailing the rape of Hagar or killing of infants after Jesus' birth with a monotone, "Thanks be to God." One of the most disturbing elements of Revelation 17 that must be pointed out is how the prostitute of Babylon is not given a voice. She is silenced and stripped of her autonomy. Furthermore, she is not given a name. Instead, her identity is tied up with her demonized sexuality and relationship to empire. We know that this is not the only time a woman is unnamed and voiceless in the Bible. When women are introduced onto the scene, we must take notice. Many of the women Jesus healed in the Gospels were unnamed and identified in a negative light. Foreigner, hemorrhaging woman, prostitute, and on and on. I resist and reject this image that equates evil with women and their sexuality. John of Patmos chose a sexualized image of a woman to describe the evil of the Roman Empire. He constantly refers to her as the prostitute of Babylon. And yes, let's not rescue him from his own language. He meant prostitute in every sense of the word. Dirty, whore, disposable. We must not turn away from the violence we hear in Revelation, especially in verse 16, which reads, "The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire." Are you squirming yet? And this is a verse from sacred scripture. How do we hold the tension of seeing the violence for what it is, while also acknowledging that it's a sacred text? So, what does this mean for us in our current context in 2020? Who have we dressed up as the prostitute of Babylon? Who do we wish to pin all the evils of empire onto? I would argue that our nation has deemed the pregnant woman seeking adequate health care and an abortion as the prostitute of Babylon. As I reflect on the rushed Supreme Court hearings last month, it's clear that the long-held discourse surrounding abortion has left us in two binaries. With her confirmation to the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett may very well tip the scales to reverse Roe v. Wade. We have demonized women's bodies and autonomy in the name of this pro-life movement. As far as I'm concerned, what the beast does to the prostitute of Babylon in Revelation is not life-giving. Neither is the way we speak of women seeking access to an abortion. We villainize, demonize, and abhor women who have had abortions or seek an abortion. The fact is, our American empire destroys women and their children, much like the Roman Empire did. In pro-life discourse, women are seen as a mere vessel to further empire through their womb and nothing more. We are incubators for empire. However, it must be the right female body, and I mean a white body. And if I'm challenging myself, I have to admit that I have caught myself demonizing Amy Coney Barrett. I have been tempted to fall into this dualistic and categorical thinking that abounds in the United States today. I must not mimic what America and the church has modeled in condemning and villainizing women. Even though I may not agree with Amy Coney Barrett's politics, I refuse to continue the legacy of villainizing women. One critique I've heard from liberal women is that Amy Coney Barrett stands on the shoulders of women who have opened doors for her, and she will reverse the progress we have made. However, I too benefit from empire as much as I critique it. My identity as a white Christian female grants me unearned privileges. So before I point the finger at Amy Coney Barrett, I must take an honest look at myself. How am I benefiting from empire, like her or John of Patmos? I think it's easy to read a text like this and align ourselves with the victorious and ideal character. However, I would argue that lately it seems we are devouring women like the beast in Revelation 17. Like John of Patmos, we have silenced women for far too long, dressed them up, and abused them. I do think God is in this text, just not how we would expect. I believe God is standing in support of the woman of Babylon as she is stripped, naked, and abused. God stands with the oppressed and the marginalized. My hope is we do the same.
You can't kill the spirit. She is like a cedar, tall and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can't kill the spirit. She is like a cedar, tall and strong. She goes on and on and on.
Reading from Genesis again, 16, verses 7 through 10. And the angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude.
The woman, speaking to the water with head bent, looked up over her horn-rimmed glasses to make eye contact with this intruder, this angel of the Lord. After pushing them up the bridge of her beautifully wide black nose, she planted her palms on her knees to stand to the melody of her gold bracelets jangling at her wrists. Her denim jacket hung on her goddess frame like the Torah, draped over the shoulders of those closest to God. The patches sewn into its fabric spoke mysteries like free Huey and Black Power and fuck the police. The intruder stepped back 10 steps because her presence needed much more room than he could accommodate. 9 paces for her ancestors and an extra pace for her Ori. Her eyes remained glued on his, and she read his soul as she read him. I had a dream you would come. How dare you step to me with such disrespect and disregard? Did you not see me communing with Oshun, the goddess of this spring? The angel stood silent, perplexed. She adjusted the long white skirt she'd previously bundled above her knees, and the fabric draped to the ground and pulled around her feet like the roots of an ancient tree. She stood firmly planted. Intruder, I asked you a question. The angel cleared his throat to adjust his tone and asked, Hagar, slave of Sarai. Let me stop you right there. The name Hagar is my government name, the name given to me by an oppressive society that sought to label me as a flight risk. I no longer go by that name. I am free now. I've been given a name by the ancestors, and you will address me by it. Ayaba, queen. Now ask me your question again. Ayaba placed her hands on her hips with feet apart, confident in the authority she had over this man. She cocked her head, afroed and kinked by the hand of Obatala to await the intruder's inquisition. The angel, of course less confident now, mumbled something under his breath before asking again, Ayaba, queen of Sarai. His voice trailed off and he winced when Ayaba sheepishly grinned. Go on, she said, popping her gum as she spoke. Ayaba, queen of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Ayaba threw her head back and laughed. loud and big. When she came back to herself, she turned her head and breathed words to the water. A wall of fresh water rose behind her and hovered there, sparkling and shimmering as the desert sun danced with it. She turned back to the eyes of the man who stood before her, and she began to plait her hair. She weaved her locks until the evening came, until the sun went down, bowing out of the water's dance, who now desired to dance with the moon. It was the moon's light against the black sky that animated Ayaba to speak again. As she twisted the end of the last braid, she spoke. I'm not afraid of you. She popped and clicked her gum with the cadence of a ticking bomb. You don't have the authority to inquire where I've been or where I'm going. She then closed all 10 gaps of space between them until they stood toe to toe. The cocoa butter shined on her skin like the glow of the moon reflected in the dark water that moved forward with her. The angel had no words. He was tired, and he'd been burned badly by the same sun that lovingly kissed her skin all day. Ayaba spoke no more, but the water rumbled, and the winds of Oya began to blow. In the distance, the angel could see a wall of fire rising over the dunes, bright yellow flames that spoke in Shango's Yoruba tongue. He became scared. He ran from this tree of a woman who stood protected by the ancient spirits of her lineage. Ayaba gathered her skirt, bundled it above her knees, and turned to the water and fire and wind. She spoke gratitude to the elements and lay down in the sand. She slept there, with black skin glowing blue under the light of her moon, and she dreamed of freedom.
You can kill the spirit. She is like a river, deep and strong. She goes on and on and on. You can kill the spirit. She is like a river, deep and strong. She goes on and on and on and on and on. As we come to the end of our service, we wanted to invite you to take a few moments to reflect on all that you've heard today. Last week we began by invoking the new day dawning, and today we end by invoking the new day dawning. So I invite you to put in the chat, what dreams do you hear beneath, around, between, beyond sacred texts? And say her name. What is her dream deferred? I invite you to share your dreams in the text as we sing our final, in the chat, as we sing our final song, The Kingdom, the New Realm of God.
Justice and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Come, love, and open us the dreams of your kingdom. The new realm of God is justice and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Come, love, and open us the dreams of your kingdom. The new realm of God is justice and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Come, love, and open us the dreams of your kingdom. The new realm of God is justice and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Come, love, and open us the dreams of your kingdom.
Can y'all hear me? Yes. For our benediction this morning, I chose the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was an Indian scholar, jurist, economist, politician, and social reformer. But most importantly, he was a Dalit who was an untouchable, lower caste person who was also the chief architect of the Constitution of India. He wrote many prolific works talking about ending caste discrimination and the deeply dehumanizing ways in which caste deems certain bodies as untouchable, impure, and therefore unworthy of living and unworthy of even having anything divine in them. So this morning, hear the words of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. My final words of advice to you are educate, agitate, and organize. Have faith in yourself. With justice on our side, I do not see how we can lose our battle. The battle to me is a matter of joy. The battle is in the fullest sense spiritual. There is nothing material or social in it. For ours is a battle not for wealth or for power. It is a battle for freedom. It is the battle of reclaiming of human personality. You must abolish your slavery yourselves. Do not depend for its abolition upon God or a superhuman. Remember that it is not enough that a people are numerically in the majority. They must be always watchful, strong, and self-respecting to attain and maintain success. We must shape our course ourselves and by ourselves. Jai Bhim.
If there are any announcements as we conclude our service that would be for the good of the community, you are welcome to share them as we depart. Thank you first to everyone who contributed to our service today. Much appreciation for the wisdom and words and voices you shared. Well, go in peace, beloveds, to love and serve our God.
Professor Sharon,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Bernie may have left already, but just a reminder about the lavender lunch, which is coming up next. Yeah, I think you put it in the chat and the link.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
And thank you all for just, wow, we're going to be laid out for a while. with all these words. So thank you so much.
Good to see everybody. Have a good day.